How's it going, guys? My name is Graham and welcome to Two Left Thumbs. Today I want to do a review for Light Fingers, the turn-based local multiplayer digital board game for the Nintendo Switch. Right away, this game has a very endearing clockwork art style as things unfold in front of you in a very mystical way. The very buildings themselves unfold and open up like a mini diorama as you enter them. And honestly, that was what first interested me in the game, seeing short videos pop up on Twitter, but the promise of a backstabbing bandit-based board game is what really convinced me to buy this. Right away, big important note here, there is a single player option, but I honestly think it's not worth buying the game for. So I immediately want to stress that you're only going to want to play this game if you intend to play the 2 to 4 player option. Okay, great. Now specifically looking at that multiplayer campaign option, everyone is playing as thieves and the goal is to be the first to gain and secure 4 loot. You can steal loot from just about any shop or stop in the game, or you can steal it directly off of another player. There's no honor among thieves here. When you carry that loot on your back, you're at risk, but once the loot is secured by returning it to a thieves' camp, then it is yours to keep. Only once all 4 are secured at camp do you truly win the game. Now, contrary to what you might expect, the player who rolled lowest goes first, and the turn order is always refreshed at the beginning of every turn. I found this to be a really important detail because it allows that low rolling character to actually explore the map, before someone with a much larger roll just charges ahead and collects all the goodies. The board itself is a randomly generated grid that exists around a large ring. You're free to explore the board in whichever direction you choose, but you won't know what's present on a space until you visit it. As you explore, you may find coins and cards along the way. You can spend 1 card per turn and carry a maximum of 5, and they contain numerous benefits like boosting your dice roll, limiting someone else's, or gaining stealth points, among several others. We'll get into stealth points a little more later. Now, your coins can be spent in shops on cards, better dice, and for benefits from several other vendors. There's loads of options there, some of them I'll leave for you to discover. Once you steal a bag of loot from a shop, your wanted level will rise by 3. Note that you personally can now never shop at that specific vendor again, but other players can. The trade-off there is that any given shop can only be robbed once. Kind of a first come, first steal sort of situation. After stealing, the vendor will alert a team of guards, which will be deployed from the nearest outpost. At the beginning of each turn, they will now also roll dice in pursuit of you until your wanted level is brought back down to 0. No matter what the guards roll, they always go after the players. There is no way to steal without raising your wanted level, so be careful when and where you choose to steal. Each turn your wanted level will naturally lower by 1, but it can also be lowered through cards, hiding in dense forests, or staying overnight in taverns. Only ones that you haven't robbed yet. Your wanted level will stack if you choose to rob again, meaning you could potentially have multiple sets of guards chasing you for much more than 3 turns. If you're caught, they will steal all of your carried loot and you miss your next turn. Guards pursuing other players will not seek you out, but if you happen to land on the same space, they'll still confiscate your loot, but you will not miss a turn. Each time a set of guards is deployed, it raises the guard activity meter. Once this hits 4, the thieves' camp will skedaddle and reappear elsewhere on the map. So a good strategy here can be to deliberately push up the guard activity meter to 4 in order to force the camp to move if it's too far from you or too near an opponent. If you manage to evade the guards and get your wanted level back down to 0, you gain 1 stealth point. Stealth points can be used to steal loot off of a player directly, to hide in dense forests, or to slip past guards in pursuit of you. While we're talking about stealth and stealing from other players, if you land on the same space as another player, for the cost of 1 stealth point, you can choose to steal from them. If you do not have a stealth point, the other option does not cost anything. You can instead choose to duel them. You do a best 2 out of 3 reflex test trying to hit the button that appears on the screen faster. The winner gains 1 of the loser's carried loot, regardless of who initiated the duel. I personally really like that trade-off. You can either spend a stealth point and guarantee a free bit of loot, or you invest nothing and risk losing loot. Now there's a lot going on the board, lots to interact with. There's a balloon that fast travels you, or the ability to hire bounty hunters to target another thief. But one of the main things you're going to encounter are the dungeons. If you choose to end your turn on a dungeon, that night the instigating player will play through an obstacle course style minigame in an effort to rake in coins. If they succeed in making it to the end of the dungeon, they also gain 2 loot. So going into a dungeon, there's very little risk here, but they are very difficult to complete. The main reason you might want to avoid a dungeon is that the other players are in charge of controlling the traps and obstacles, so they're likely to make things quite hard on you. But they can also choose to ignore you and instead focus on stealing all the coins in the dungeon. If they do that, it makes it easier for yourself to reach the end, but if you fail, then potentially all you've done is fatten the purses of the other thieves. The perspective when you're running through the dungeons is a little bit wonky, but it's positioned to try and make things accessible for both the person running the dungeon and those controlling the traps. It kind of feels like it's tipped in the favor of those running the traps. We personally found that someone's way more likely to fail a dungeon simply by falling into a pit than they are being damaged from traps. We were getting better at it over time, but the dungeons are really tough when you're first starting. The single player mode of Light Fingers is actually just solo runs of these dungeons with AI controlling the traps, so I suppose that would be good practice, but it feels like a mini game at best. The larger game is kind of slow, and so having this in there helps break up that pace, but without the risk and reward layered context of the actual board game, it doesn't really feel worth playing. It does feel unfortunate that you can't do the campaign with AI. I think that about covers all the rules and everything important gameplay wise. We've played it a few times. I've played it with 2 players and 3. I would say more players does seem to be more fun, but it did take longer since we were more actively interfering with each other. But we did still have a lot of fun playing it with just 2 people. I would say 3 and 4 is the best, but 2 is totally viable. The standard game is 25 turns long, but the game length will depend on how quickly one person can secure that 4 loot. Our shortest session was about 30 minutes, and the longest one was nearly 2 hours. But the shorter one ended after only 11 turns, and the longest one took the full 25. It's really going to depend on number of players and how they play, how aggressive or defensive they want to be, but you can also set custom rules. We've only tried playing with the standard rules so far, but the board game size, loot bags required, total number of turns, and overall difficulty of the dungeons can all be controlled. There's lots of options here. You can essentially half or double the board game size. You can half or double the amount of loot bags required. You can skyrocket the number of turns or do a quick and breezy 10. There's a lot to choose from there, so you can really cater a session to what you are looking for that particular day. The art style is wonderful, and the way things move and mechanize is very entertaining. It's supported by some very well-suited music, but that's really all just a cherry on top for me. The random aspect of the board keeps things interesting and highly replayable, but I would suspect that the pacing might be a turn-off for some. I would really argue that they nailed down that tabletop feel, and if you're normally okay sinking a few hours into a board game, then you'll feel totally at home here. The gameplay is very simple, easy to pick up and learn, but there's a multitude of playstyles and strategies that all feel viable. So again, I would say the replay value here is huge, which is really important for a game like this. We've thoroughly enjoyed the game so far, but I can only recommend it if you have others to play with. I would say be careful who though, because depending how devious they choose to be, you might not be friends for long. If you're not quite convinced or want to know more, we are doing a playthrough of this on the channel. So if you're curious to see how a session of the game plays out, we do have part 1 of that out now. I'll have a link to that in the end cards. If you've already played the game for yourself, let us know what you think. Thank you guys all so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.